Hello, everybody. This is Lauren Bauer with Lauren Bauer Health Coaching, and today I have the great pleasure of sitting with Taylor Mavrakos of MFP Financial. And today we just wanted to talk a little bit about financial wellness. So, something that we've had many conversations about is how actually financial wellness can impact your health. And I think sometimes we don't always link those two things together, even though we know when we're in a situation where financially, maybe we don't really feel like we have a lot of control over our finances, our habits. It really can be very stressful and highly impact your health. So I wanted to kind of sit down with you, really just break down some practical tips for people, or even just mindsets of how to think about finance, especially personal finance, so that way people are better set up for success.
Well, thanks for having me on,
Of
Lauren.
course.
I'm happy to be here.
Yes.
So I always joke that my job, when they say, what is a financial advisor? I just say it's if a therapist and a personal trainer had a kid that was good at math. That's
Yes.
a financial advisor.
Incredible way to put it.
Yeah. So basically, when you break it down, what that looks like is the therapist part is the more you tell me, the more I can help. And I know you have that as a health coach as well,
Yes.
where so much of everything is mental, right? And your mindset. And then the personal training piece is that I tell people, you know, your personal finance isn't a set it and forget it situation.
Right.
It's a constantly evolving thing, and it's a discipline. Just like you work out your body, that's how you should be working out your financial goals, where you're at.
Yes.
The first step of that is always awareness. So a
Yeah.
lot of people are afraid, like how they're afraid to weigh themselves. They're afraid to log in and see, where's my bank account at? Where's my credit card at? Because to your point, it causes so much stress.
Right.
So that's the first just tip you can do is get a handle on where you're at. Because if you don't have a handle on where you're at, it's like with your health, then you can't really project out to where you want to go.
Right. If you're not even aware of the issues at hand, it's like, how can you begin to set goals and begin to resolve those problems? You can't.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's step number one, which sounds really basic. Pull your credit report. What does that look like? You can do a free annual credit report. Pull that up. Take a look at it.
Yes.
You don't want to wait till you're trying to finance something to look at that credit report, because if you have any issues on your credit report, it takes a long time to write letters to the credit reporting agencies, dispute it, all of that.
Right.
So if you're in a time crunch, that's not the best time to start doing stuff like that, right?
No.
So yeah, so the first piece of it is just kind of getting your head around where you're at, and this ties into your wealth or health journey as well as your wealth journey, is really looking at your budgeting. So not only being aware of where you're at, where we call it like a net worth statement, right? So you've got your net worth statement, but also your cash flow statement. So taking a look at like, what am I spending my money on?
Yeah.
And then also, as I'm sure you work with clients, I'm a client of Lauren's. She's been wonderful to work with. You want to also look at, what am I spending my time on? Because where you're investing your time and where you're investing your money, that's where your priorities are, right?
Right. Yeah, it really does speak to your priorities.
100%.
That's so true.
100%. And as we know, being healthy, there are expenses tied to that.
Sure.
If you're trying to join gyms, if you're trying to eat healthier or eat organic, it's not going to be your fast food and that kind of stuff. And then time of just cooking and not going through the McDonald's drive-thru, right? And really
those
taking that
non-dollar
time.
expenses. Yep.
Exactly. So just kind of becoming aware and putting together a budget. And really, if your health is something that's a priority, it will be reflected in how you manage and spend your money.
Right. So just to dive a little bit deeper into the budget piece, are there particular apps do you recommend doing, like an Excel sheet? Does it depend on the person and kind of their style and what they're going to keep up with? If someone's just like, hey, I want to start a budget, where do we go? Where do we start?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've had clients use apps. I'm not always the most techie gal. I always say, whatever way you can do it. If it was me, I would do an Excel spreadsheet. The easiest way to start with it is to take a look at separating your expenses into two things: your fixed expenses and your variable expenses.
Gotcha.
Your fixed expenses should stay the same month over month. As we've seen with inflation, everything is pretty much double what it used to be, if not more. I mean, things are crazy expensive. So really checking in, like how much has your rent gone up? Or if you own a house, like how much more did your insurance go up or your property taxes?
Yes.
Because a lot of people have what's called escrow where they just pay a monthly payment and it includes all that. And you just really want to be mindful of like, do I have the best home insurance rate? Because you really, if you shop around at this point, you might be able to save yourself some money. So taking a look at your fixed expenses is something that is a good step one where you can feel, and you know this, and you've helped me with this, where like, it's good to have goals where you feel like they're achievable. Like you get one thing done, checked off the list, good, right?
Yes.
So your fixed expenses can kind of be that boost to get you to the variable expenses. So the variable is where you're really going to want to be mindful of what you're spending your money on. And it's variable because it can change. So things like entertainment, vacations, clothes, fitness, working out, really anything that you month to month, it varies. That's what you're going to put in that section. What you're going to want to do that is look at like bank statements, look at credit cards, and really start. And the important thing, again, it's a discipline, right? So you're not going to do that for 1 month and be like, all right, that was a good budget exercise.
Right.
Like, honestly, you might want to take the first month or two where you're just, typically I recommend 3 months, honestly, where you're just taking a look at tracking what you're already doing and finding the patterns there. Because if you've been doing it for a full quarter, you can kind of see. It's like when I first started working with you and we would just log the food that I was already eating, right?
Yeah,
So
as
you
you're
can
saying
think with
this,
your
I'm
clients.
just seeing the parallel. I'm like, wow.
Right, exactly. And over time, it's easier to say to the person, right? Because they'll be like, oh, I always eat healthy. Like, I don't know, like what we could tweak.
Yes.
And you're like, well,
Like, actually.
Yeah.
Well, that's the crazy thing too is, so I know, I mean, both when I've had to log my food and started a budget, the things that I thought I had a good grasp on it. I thought I was aware. I remember when I first started a budget, I think in a month I had spent $95 on Starbucks. And I was like, what is happening? Yes. So that immediately changed. And same with tracking food. Anytime I've tracked, and I've been doing this for a long time, so I feel like I have a good idea of how to put healthy meals together. Every time I learn something, whether it's, oh, I'm, under eating protein. Oh, wow, I'm over consuming. Oh, I actually weighed this out. This is what a portion size is. I guess I
love
was
when you
off.
had me do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when back to your whole thing about awareness, I feel like the budget, especially when you were talking about doing it over 3 months, that's a huge way to build awareness and to really get a good idea. Because if you're doing it for a month, okay, cool, you learn some things.
Right.
But I would imagine, especially with the variable expenses, you really kind of need a few months to see how those play out.
Because I'm sure you have that with clients, right? Where they go, well, it was Mother's Day and my dad's birthday and this, so I don't normally eat out twice a week, but that month was just crazy. And you're like, okay, but then when you take a look at 3 months, you're like, but were 3 months crazy? Because then it becomes kind of irrefutable at that point.
Yeah, and maybe reflective of what their lifestyle is actually looking like. Maybe your lifestyle is just a little bit crazy, and what can we do to actually change and mitigate that?
100%.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about awareness. We've moved into budget.
Yep.
What's next?
Once
I've grasped the budget, what are we doing next?
The budget.
Yes.
Something I want to add about it too is if you're in a partnership, making sure that if you're in that partnership, you want to make sure that just because you're getting on that page, you need to make sure your partner is.
Right.
Kind of like when you have clients where one part of a couple is on a health journey and the other one's not there yet, how that can be really challenging.
For sure.
So just being mindful. Finances are a leading cause of divorce. So I do a lot of, I'm a certified divorce financial analyst as well. And so second to infidelity, financial struggles and stress really contribute to that. So just getting on the same page as your partner about, and like I said, I mean, just kind of having that judgment-free beginning piece. And it is so much like when I started working with you, where it's like, it's not your health, but it's the same thing for your finances, where like just in the beginning, commit to like awareness and that's it.
Right.
And then starting to tweak it from there.
Absolutely.
And so like, for example, like your Starbucks example. So when we take a look at the budgeting, the next step is like, you're aware that you're spending $95 at Starbucks.
Yes.
You buy a cold brew pitcher on Amazon, right? All of a sudden we've cut it and now you're cash flow positive, let's say $90 a month by the time you get your coffee or whatever. Well, then the next step is, where do you allocate that to? right?
Right.
And that's where it gets really customized, just like your health journey. Like your wealth is the same. I always say it's as individual as your thumbprint. Like it's not something that fits for everybody a certain way. And not only that, but when you become really mindful of cutting back, then you are even more aware of when you start to spend again, and you're mindful of what you're spending on. It's kind of like when you're finally starting to work out and eat healthy. Like, I don't want to binge because I know how hard it is to eat right, burn those calories, because especially working with like you, when you're losing weight or you're getting healthy the right way, it's not a crash diet where you're losing like 10 pounds in a week or something crazy like that. So if I know that I'm consistently losing like a half a pound to 2 pounds a week, all of a sudden I'm like, well, if I do this one big cheat day or whatever, it's going to be enough calories to offset all that work for that week, right? So once you kind of get into that discipline of like, I'm really trying to be mindful of what I spend, not only does it help you on the front end because it cuts out some frivolous expenses, but on the flip side of that, you be careful with what you're going to spend your money on. And something else with the budgeting, it's kind of like your Starbucks example. The amount of things people are subscribed to that they're not aware that they subscribe to. And I would even encourage people, like, for example, if you say, like, I really want to hire somebody like Lauren to help me with my health, right? Because let's be honest, like, if you're at the point where you've been, and I was at this point where you're mulling it over for such a long time and you're like, I'll start next week, you're probably not going to. Like, you probably need some help in that area, an expert to help you. Well, a lot of times whenever you hire an expert, you have to allocate a budget for that, right? So being mindful of, as I cut out these subscriptions I didn't even know I had, like why am I, or I can watch Hulu with ads and save myself $8 a month, or maybe instead of no ads.
5 different streaming services.
Exactly.
Maybe I need just
exactly.
a couple.
Maybe exactly. Stuff
fine.
like that. Like, stuff like that. Right. Do I need a FabFitFun box and a ThredUp box and all these other different, like, I don't think so. I don't think you need all that.
I think I'll survive.
Right. Yes. So really just saying, like, I know that my goal is I want to work with a health professional, or I want to work with a therapist, or I want to work with whoever. This is realistically how much that's going to cost. And all of a sudden, when you start cutting back on the things you don't need, a lot of times it can really propel you toward getting those things that you need.
That's so many good points you made. One, I love what you said about when you're doing this with a partner, to start judgment free, because I could see how it very easily could escalate into, well, you have a bad Starbucks habit. Oh yeah, well, you shop too much and you do this, and oh my gosh, you spent this much on this. It's almost like, okay, we just need to wipe the slate clean. Let's just get some numbers. They might be scary numbers that we don't like. That's okay, because we're planning on fixing that. So I really love just that concept, because again, same with health and fitness, if there's all that judgment attached, you're not going to make the change, because one, it's scary to dive into that and become aware. And then once you do become aware, now if you're just bombarded with judgment, it's like, well, I'm just going to go back to what I was doing before, because at least I didn't have to deal with all that stress
100%.
On top of that. So I think that is just huge. And I really like also what you said when you were talking about, okay, now I've saved my $90 from Starbucks, but what am I going to do with it? Because very quickly that could suddenly become, well, I have more clothing money now, you know, like this free,
I'm rich.
Like I didn't assign where I wanted this to go, so now I've got this free $90. Well, now you're just in the same place you were, but different, right? So I love that half the step is, okay, seeing where there's a problem, but now I have this extra money. How can I properly invest it into something? That's huge. So yeah, love all those points on the budget. Just wanted to make sure I highlighted those.
And that's what I would say too, is like when you're figuring out where to spend, what I tell people is like, you always want to look at your ROI, your return on investment. What I tell everybody, I have a dog, as you know, my dog's name's Roxy, and I say, your money is not your pet. And what I mean by that is, we all go to work all day and we come home and we love our pets to death, right? But they don't work. They actually cost money.
Indeed.
And they don't work. So your money should not be like that. Your money should be working at least as hard, if not harder, than you're working. So while you are at work all day, your money should also be working. Now, in investments, the return on investment should be your money is making money for you. If you're investing in something like your health, for like in my case, like my ROI is I feel a lot better. I have a lot more energy, right? And it's not a dollar amount, but I can tell you I'm way more focused, way more productive at work, just different things where I don't have a dollar value to put to it.
Sure.
But I'm so glad that I took some of my money and I allocate it to investing in myself, because it creates that return on investment for you. So just kind of being mindful. And again, like having to cut back really just puts you in that mind space of like, it's just like when you start eating healthy, like it's like, because I am not restricting myself, but I'm much more mindful of what I'm doing, right? And I'm prioritizing different things. Then you know when you want to splurge on something or whatever. You're just mindful of the consequences of that because you have to work so hard to maintain your day-to-day, right?
Sure.
And that's the same thing with spending, is like if you take a look at, like if you want to splurge on whatever every once in a while, fine. But you're now accountable to that budget and you know where that's coming from, as opposed to a lot of times, and sometimes people emotional spend. Like sometimes when people are sad or whatever the case may be, like, or they're on social media too much, clicking on ads, all of a sudden you don't even know what happened, and you have bought, you know how many clients I have or people I know where they're like, there's just a box from Amazon at the front door every day, and like, I don't know what it is, and you're like, what do you mean?
What?
'Cause it's way too simple, right? To hit like buy now. It's like, it's way too simple to go get unhealthy snacks or do whatever. I mean, it's the same with money. It's easy to start spending on a bunch of different things. So that's what I would say too, is like, figure out the things that you really want to focus on, and then figure out money-wise what that looks like, because everything costs money to be able to do, right?
And I think framing it the way that you're saying, there's a cost, and it might not necessarily be financial.
Right.
Like, is it costing you time? Is it costing you stress? Is it costing you, you know, lower energy levels because maybe you're not as healthy? Or even if it's like, okay, I'm spending money on these clothing items, let's say, because I'm stressed, but then I'm more stressed later because now my finances are taking even more of a hit. I could imagine it would just become this vicious cycle where like the coping mechanism is also the problem that's causing you stress. So you just get stuck in this loop. Whereas if you take a step back, you're like, okay, what is the true return on investment in this? Is it actually making me feel better? Not really. Maybe in that like moment when I'm like, yes, something new, but that's going to replenish into, okay, now I'm stressed again because I've spent money where I probably shouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I always, with certain clothes, like I will use Poshmark. And I'm fortunate where I'm not in a place where like I have to make money on every article of clothing I buy. I use it because for me, I don't ever want to get too comfortable with over shopping. So I always want to be mindful of like, these clothes that I'm buying are an asset. What does that look like? What is the resale value of that investment, right? And taking a look at, and sure, part of the ROI is like, I need to look professional for work or whatever the case may be. So I'm not going to get the full dollar amount that I spent.
Right.
But just that discipline of like having to make it more transactional makes me more mindful of not online shopping as much or something like that. I think the same was true when I started working with you, where I was like, okay, I'm really prioritizing my health. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And all of a sudden, you just have to be more mindful, because you're like, that's where my time, my energy is going. And it really holds you accountable. Because we know this, like there's a lot of people, if they're not happy with where they're at health-wise, it's like the only people that are worse off than the ones who won't stop talking about it are the ones that just internalize all of it and feel shame about it.
Right.
And I can't tell you the amount of brain space you freed up for me of just like, I'm like, I've got my health under control. Like, I'm good. Like, and I know it's not this mystery of like, I don't know why this month I feel, you know, better than I felt last month. It's like, no, I know exactly why I feel a certain way, because it's been explained to me. And if I have like a holiday, right, where I fall off the wagon for a couple of days, like I know I have the tools, right? It's not just like luck, or because I think a lot of us think that, especially with health, like it's luck, it's this, and by the way, investments too. They'll be like, well, my one uncle, or now TikTok, everybody says they're like a millionaire day trader. I don't know how many of these millionaire day traders there are on TikTok, right? Like, and then I bought 4 apartment complexes, and I'm 26, and I'm a billionaire. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of you. Like, we don't have that many billionaires. Like, I don't think so.
Like, I am, just believe me.
But yeah, they're like 100%. So yeah, so I take a look at all that to say, like, people talk a big game, right? And they do
Sure.
that with money, they do that with fitness, they do that with all kinds of stuff. And you have to really look at like the mechanics of it. And that would probably be the next step, I would say, with people, is like once you get comfortable with like that ROI, if you get more into like the investing space, always what I do with clients is very similar to what you do with clients, where I want to educate my clients on what exactly we're doing. Like this isn't just like, this is your specialty, you work on it, you figure it out. No, because things pop up just like in your health. Things pop up with your wealth all the time. Your car breaks down, you got to get a new car. Do we finance it? Do we pay cash? Do I stay in the same apartment? Do I buy something? Now I have a partner. What does that look like? I want to get a dog. I want to adopt a kid. I mean, there are a million things that go on, right? And I always want to help clients with that, just like you do. But I also want my clients to have some preliminary tools that you don't need to go to school or have an advanced degree in order to have some agency, right, over your ability to make snap decisions on the little things.
Yes. Well, I feel like what you're saying with that too is very similar with health, where a lot of things, both with finance and health, are just shrouded in mystery, like you were saying.
Oh yeah.
You know,
no one can figure it out.
No, it's like we're so confused, and like it's kind of with good reason, because if you think about, at least, you know, when we were in high school, and unless you're studying in college, like you're not being taught any sort of like personal finance or how to navigate anything. Maybe you had parents who helped teach you, maybe you figured it out on your own, but like so many things, it's just like, you're an adult, go.
Good luck.
And same with health. It gets so confusing because everyone's an expert. So everyone's out there just saying, well, here's the one trick to get healthy. And people are like, okay, like, well, why didn't that work? Let me try the 9 other tricks I just heard about. And it's like, if we could just give people tools so that, you know, maybe they're not the expert, they don't have all this time to invest in figuring out all the intricacies. Great, that's why they have us. But they have the tools, so that way when they're confronted with the situation, like you said, if, you know, I get a flat tire, if all of a sudden my apartment rent is just jacked up, like things happen in life. Like even if you've got this perfect budget where everything's allocated, things are going to still happen. And then it's like, okay, well, what do I do? Like, how do I have the tools to pivot and figure this out? Another point that you touched on was, it sounds like finance in a way is having a certain kind of mindset. Just like I feel like with health, there's a mindset you go into things. For example, you know, if I'm going out to eat, my mindset isn't necessarily I can't have dessert or I can't have that pizza slice, but it's more like, again, doing a little bit of that cost benefit analysis where I'm like, okay, if I have pizza and cake, I'm probably not going to feel great. So maybe I'm going to do the pizza. Maybe I'll throw in a salad there and I can skip dessert this time. It'll be all right. So it's that kind of that compromise. So with finance, what are examples where you kind of see that play out in people's lives, where it's like, okay, here's an opportunity where I have to initiate my financial mindset to make a good decision?
So I think it's similar to when you start getting healthy. In the beginning, you have to take that leap of faith because you haven't done that yet, right?
Yes.
Where you've foregone the
We've got a guest star.
We got a guest.
Surprise.
This is my dog.
Very lovely.
So you have to have that almost like a leap of faith in the beginning, right? Where you just have to say to yourself, my long-term goal is more important than my immediate gratification.
Yes.
Right? And like there just has to be a point, and you have to be at that point where you're willing in the beginning. Like it's probably not going to work the day that you start, right? Like it's probably not going to be, and sometimes we invest in things and it doesn't work out, right? Like, and so it's something to where you just have to commit always to that longer term vision of what it looks like. So how do you start it? It always helps when you have little things. Like I mentioned, like make the win that you made the budget. Make the win that you reviewed the budget for 3 months. Make the next win that you tried to cut something out. You are great with that with your work, where you're like, we're going to do 3 goals per week. Because what most people do when they're trying to get healthy, right, is they're like, I'm just going to like drink water and like chew on some celery. And I'm going to do that and I'm going to walk 20,000 steps a day. And I see no way that this could fail. And you're like,
no, I could do that forever. I love celery.
Yeah.
Only,
yeah, 100%. Like it's great. And so you know, and what happens, right? It never works.
No.
So it's the same thing where you were like, we're going to do like 3. And I remember being like, okay, like, I'm like, our 3 goals are probably like, I need to be in the gym for 3 hours and like, you know what I mean? Like, and the celery and something else.
Give up my life.
And you were like, what if it was just like, you drink like, you know, an extra 2 glasses of water per day? And I was like, I'm an overachiever, Lauren. Like I obviously can do that. Obviously, that's something I could do.
Yeah.
And then I would be like, it would be like 3 things, you know, and they got harder, right, as it went along. But what you're so good at doing is like, you don't realize when you're in it is like you're giving those wins to your client, but then the next week there's 3 more things, and then 3 more things, and all of a sudden you're at 12 small things that make a big difference. And it's the same with finance. Like, maybe your first month, you're not like, well, we will buy no clothes. We will sit on the floor of our new hut that we live in with no TV, and we will be rich. You know what I mean? Like that's not gonna work. So like,
how long could you do that?
Yeah, it's not gonna happen. So like taking a look at maybe doing the same thing of like 3 places you want to cut back in a month. What does that look like for you, right? And starting there and really taking a look at and I know honestly, like especially working with you, like I saved so much money on going out, like to eat.
Right.
Taking a look at, you know, when you go out, even just like going out for a drink versus being at home, especially now tipping is so expensive, all these other things. I mean, just being mindful of like, when you get into a healthier place, I can tell you from personal experience, like you will spend less money on discretionary, like going out stuff, and you can reallocate it. Like I got a hot yoga membership and things like that. Like I reallocated it, but it definitely is a way when you prioritize like your health. It's the reason why a lot of like these really successful people that we see, especially like the ones that are in like their 40s, early 50s, like they always prioritize, like, yes, they're very financially successful, good investors. All of them are focused on longevity, on health, all of those things.
Right.
And the reason why is because they see how much they're linked, and truly like taking a different look at your energy levels for me has been a huge thing.
Yes.
So I would say it's similar to what you do. A long-winded way of answering your question is really like taking a look at what are 3 wins that I can do this month, right? With finance, I'd probably make it more month-based than week-based. Like, what are 3 things we can cut this month? And like, let's circle back at the end of the month. Let's take a look at the budget. And then maybe at the end of the month, like our reward is if we saved $100, we get to decide together how we're going to spend that. Or if you're by yourself, like I get to decide how I want to spend that, right?
Yes.
And then kind of going from there. But that's what I would say would be that first. And it does. It's a leap of faith at first because like it's not fun to cut out stuff.
No.
Right? Especially when you're kind of addicted to it and you're in that's really that cyclical space. It's like overeating. It's like I don't feel good when I overeat, but I can't stop. But I don't feel good when I doom scroll on my phone for 2 hours. But I tell myself I always round it to the nearest 5 minutes. That's why I got rid of Instagram on my phone. Because I'd be like, all right, it's 8:48. At 8:50, I'm going to stop. At 8:50, I'm like, well, is it at the beginning of the 8:50?
Right.
Or is it the end of the 8:50?
Technicalities.
I was like, oh no, it's 8:51. I guess I have to go till 8:55. Oh man. So like, you just got to be careful. I know.
Yes.
So it's stuff like that where like you just have to, and that's where I think, especially in the beginning, having like somebody who holds you accountable, it's not yourself, is really helpful. And that's the other thing I will say about like the work that, and we've discussed this before, like you and I work in very touchy, sensitive fields, right?
For sure.
And they're linked to a lot of different things. So like the way somebody feels about how they look or how their health is, like a lot of times that is embedded in a lot of different areas of their life.
Yes.
And same with their money. Like I remember when I first started doing this, I'm pretty quantitative based. Like I love numbers. And I was like so excited. I'm like, all right, I'm going to sit down with the clients. And I'd worked at a mutual fund company. So I'm like, we're really going to like get into the line items. Like, and they're going to love it.
They're going to think this is awesome.
Yeah. And they would like sit down and they would say, I don't know, just whatever. They're like, my kid's going to college and I'm so stressed and how am I going to pay for it? And I was like, anyway, but look at these numbers. And they were like, is this going to help me or not?
So numbers are cool.
I was like, all right, you know what I mean? Or they would just say, or they'd be like, I just lost my job. Like, what does that look like? And all of a sudden the meeting is, you know, in a completely different place, you know, or they would say like, my moving my parent into a nursing home. I'm not happy in my marriage. I'm getting remarried. What does that look like? I mean, I was talking about all these things, and I was like, we're dealing with a lot of feelings for a place that's supposed to be very numbers driven. And the reason why is because money is a vehicle to get you to where you want to go. That's all it is, right? And so that's where it's the same with your health, right? It affords you the ability to do the things that you want to do.
100%.
And that's why it becomes that fuel piece is so sensitive. And it is, and you touched on this earlier, there's such like an accusatory shame piece about both the things we do. It's like, if you're not good at it yet, it's your fault, and this is why, and look at this person, they're doing so much. There's a lot of comparison that's out there. You know what I mean? So just like, you just got to be really careful in both of our fields to be looking always at like positive outcome based, not like we are on trial and we are trying to figure out who done it. Like, it doesn't matter. It's done.
It happened.
Here we are.
100%. No, it really is crazy how much vulnerability is really like required both with finance and health. Because again, like, you're opening up such a huge part of yourself. Like with finance, I mean, like you said, it could be a divorce that someone's going through. It could be a lost job. Like, I'm sure there are feelings of failure that come with that, where whether it's, you know, they look at it as a failed marriage, or, you know, I lost my job, therefore society sees me as a failure. So again, it really does go back to the awareness piece. You can't hit that part until you're ready to open up. And I think our job is partially being able to receive that and interact with that, because again, we both love what we do. So like, you're ready to dive in with numbers. I'm like, you want to hear about anatomy? You want to hear about a squat rack? And they're like, no, I'm just trying to like get in better shape.
They're like, no, this is the pair of pants I need to figure out how to fit into.
Get me in these. And I'm like, but do you want to know the anatomy of your quads? And they're like, what is happening? So yeah, it's kind of like scaling back a little bit. So we're like, okay, ultimately we're going to help people more by receiving that emotional piece, being able to navigate that, and then give them the, you know, the nerdy details that we love, but in a way that actually matters and is actually hitting the points that they care about. I just feel like that's super huge. So yeah, it's very interesting to see that come up in financial wellness as well.
Well, and I think the interesting thing about both of our fields is that it does manifest, right? So it's like one of those things. You can't be like, I don't know how I got here. All I ever did was eat salads. Or like in my case, like, I don't know how I got here. Like, I've never swiped my credit card one time. And I'm like, respectfully, no. Like, you know what I mean? You can see that that's not the case.
Who's doing that?
Right. There's a phantom in your house.
It's like, oh no.
It's a different problem.
You're being haunted.
It's a Ghostbuster situation.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's one of those things where like, I think that's a really tough part about what we do, right? Is that you have a lot of external proof that something is going on. Right? And just looking at that, and the thing is, it's kind of like what we were saying earlier, like the best day to start is today. Like, and today is better than tomorrow. And yesterday would have been better than today, but here we are. Like, we can't change that, right? And just really looking at like whatever point in the mess you're in, it's only gonna get messier. So let's just start today. And that's where I think it's really helpful to have a coach, an expert, all these different things to be like, hey, like we're starting here. It's gonna get better. You know what I mean? Not like, because I'm sure a lot of people that if they're like, oh, I'm not ready to work with Lauren yet, let me just lose 10 pounds by myself, and then I'll reach out.
100%.
You know what I mean? Same with mine. Like let me clean up this credit card, whatever, and then I'll reach out. Like, let me do this and then I'll reach out. And it's like, but why? And the harsh reality is like, for example, I've been on this planet, when I started working with you, I'd been on this planet for 30 years. I had 30 years to take agency over, like doing the work, doing the research, doing all these things, and I didn't do it because I spent my time doing other things, right? And so it's just at some point being honest with yourself and being like, I've logged how many miles in my life? Like, I have logged a lot of years and I haven't been able to figure this out. So I need somebody to help me with it. You know what I mean?
And there's nothing wrong with that either, because I mean, same with me in finance. It's been hilarious, some of the conversations we've had, especially, you know, me being a new business owner, and then I'm like, what do I do with this money? I'm scared to touch it. I don't know where to put it already. Oh my gosh. And Taylor's like, it's okay. Like, I'm gonna break it down for him.
It's a good thing.
Okay, thanks. You know, things that we would think are very basic things.
Right.
And they are. But again, if we're at a point where we're in that like avoidance kind of stage where we're like, okay, like whether it's I'll figure this out or I'm gonna save $1,000 myself first and then I'll be in a better place.
And she'll be so impressed when I come in.
Yeah, she won't be as like, oh God, you suck at this. And it's like, well, okay, that's kind of like why we studied what we studied.
Exist.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. Mm-hmm. And like, unfortunately, yes, there are people out there that are very judgmental in our professions. That's just the people factor. But it's kind of getting to the point of, okay, am I ready to step out of avoidance? Mm-hmm. It's going to be hard. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a lot of like emotion attached. There's going to be a lot of just messy feelings and fears that are going to come up. But like you said, this is the worst point and it's only going to get better.
Right.
So actually taking the time to be like, okay, let me process these hard things. Let me actually take action versus just saying, oh, it's fine or covering it up. That's going to be huge down the road. And how you laid out just setting up those little small wins over the course of a month, that's huge because it gives you action steps that you can actually do. Like with me and my coffee addiction, it's like, all right, I can still have my coffee, but let's make it cheaper.
And you bought that thing, the French press thing, right? Is that what it's called?
I've got every
You have all the things. Yeah.
I could have coffee 12 different ways at home, and it's great.
You're a barista, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
You moonlight as a
I
barista.
made a Starbucks for myself. That's what I had to do.
Bauer Brewing.
Exactly. Bauer Brewing is my side business.
Excellent.
Coming soon. LLC. But it really is like, you make those action steps and you think at first that you're restricting yourself, which is taking away that freedom.
No fun.
Right, exactly. Like, I have to say no and I can't spend.
Right.
But like what you don't realize is it's actually giving you freedom.
That's a good point.
You know, because now I've cut back. I still got my coffee. It's great. But now I have this money. What can I do with it now? Yeah. You know?
And you don't have the stress and the shame of like, it's part of that awareness piece, right? Like once you make that monthly budget, if you decide to go to Starbucks, you're going to know in the back of your head, like, all right, well, I saw that $95 number and that didn't look
right. Taking my way up.
Right, right. And I think too, like, I think this is worth touching on that you were saying is kind of like another next step is like, if you ever feel judged by a professional you're working with, don't work with them.
Right.
Because I think a lot of times, you know, when we are, especially like if we're looking at positions of authority, right? In places where we don't feel like we know as much.
Yes.
Like, and I tell you this, I'm like, you're like, I know this question is probably really simple. I'm like, ask it. And it's probably not that simple. And if you don't ask it, like, especially with the business, like, ask me what the write-offs are. Yeah. And like, ask me sooner than later. So that way for all those years, you get that credit. Because if we're 4 years into working together and you're like, oh, I forgot to mention that I have this, this, and this, like, ask, you know? Right. So really just, while I think, especially with the fields that we're in, because there's vulnerability to it, because there's shame tied to it, I think sometimes people can get a little bit less, they can feel a little bit less entitled to discern if someone is a good fit for them as an expert or a partner.
Right.
And what I would say is, like, you don't have to know a lot about finance to know which financial advisor to go with.
That makes sense.
It's a lot of just like anybody else you pick on your team. Right. It's how you feel around them. And realizing, like, I tell all my clients, like, they are the boss. Like, I'm not the boss, right? It's like, you don't live inside your clients' bodies. If they don't tell you what's going on, or if you think a certain plan will work for them and then their body reacts to it a different way, you're at the mercy of what their body's gonna. You're not like, well, that's too bad because we're doing it anyway. I don't care if it causes you inflammation. You're fine.
Yes.
So I think that there's that piece of it where, like, just because you're not an expert on the topic doesn't mean you're not an expert in knowing, like, what kind of people you like to work with, like how you feel when you leave a meeting. Like, do you feel like you can ask questions? Because if you don't feel like you can ask questions, it's time to go find somebody else that you're going to work with.
That's such a good point. Because, I mean, 100%, I would say that is, like, at least 90% of the reason why I come to you guys, because I am financially, like, I don't understand it. I never learned it. And I need to be able to be in a spot where I can ask questions that feel real dumb and really, like,
they're not dumb.
Real, but they feel, you know, where I'm like, I don't know what's happening. Right. What is money? To be able to sit down and have it explained to you and have somebody talk to you like you're an adult with an intelligent brain, even though you don't know the subject, you know?
Right.
It's like
anything else, you can learn it.
Yeah. And it's great to be in a position where you're like, oh, we're having a discussion about something I know nothing about. You're explaining it in a way that I can understand because I'm not a numbers gal. We know this. It's huge. Like, and if you don't have that piece, well, it doesn't matter if you've got all the secrets to financial wellness. If I can't ask the questions or I can't feel comfortable around interacting, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. 100%. And
Yeah.
same with you with kind of walking me through different, just like health information. Like we looked at the plate. I was like, oh, never saw that. You're like, it's here on the government website. I'm like, didn't know that. Good to know. And just like all these different, and I was much more, I leaned more toward vegetarian. I wasn't fully, and you helped me a lot with like adding in protein. And this is why, right? And that's what you want when you're working with people is like, you don't want somebody who's just going to tell you what to do. You want them to say like, this is why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's still your body. It's still your life. It's still your money. Like you should have some agency over how that conversation goes. And when I tell people, I always say, when they're like, oh, well, why should I hire an expert? I can Google, I can TikTok, I can Instagram Reel, whatever. So I always say, I'm like, if you think you have a cold, if you have a cough, you might Google it. If you think you have cancer, are you going to Google it?
Right.
No. And what I call it is I always say, no more WebMD finance. If you won't do it with your health, don't do it with your money.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. You get what you pay for all the time.
Right.
You should be getting what you pay for. And if it's all free and you're figuring it out and you're on the Google, and here's the thing, maybe you do figure it out, right? Like,
sure.
But you know what usually that means is that if it's a profession, if you took the time to figure that out, how neglectful were you of the thing you're already really good at?
Right.
And being compensated to do.
Sure.
It's not a matter of like most of my clients could do what I do if they took the time. I would argue I could do what a lot of my clients do if I took the time. But the reality is that we all have one thing in common, which is we have a finite amount of time in a day, right? And in our lives.
Sure.
And really taking a look at how do I outsource some of these different roles. So I always say, like when I meet with clients, it's like a board meeting and they're the CEO of their life and I'm their CFO. And a lot of times my challenge and my role is to fill other board seats at the table. So they need a mortgage. Do I have a mortgage expert? They need a realtor. Do I know a realtor? These different people that they might not need as frequently as they need me. And you have the same thing with your clients, right? If you have to kind of outsource to certain different specialists, or I know you did that with me, certain different people that you partner with.
Yeah, definitely. No, and it makes sense because then we're all able to do what we love at an excellent level versus just, I got to figure this out and I got to figure this. Well, now it's just taking away. Now we're just doing everything kind of shitty, Whereas if we had actually taken the time to fill those positions, like those board seats, it's like, oh, wow, this is great. We're all being excellent. And it's all just working out very nice. It's not taking away from any one thing. And it's huge. Yeah, it makes a big difference.
I always tell this story. It was when I first started working here. I was having lunch. We ordered Chinese food. And so we were all sitting in the conference room ordering Chinese food. And we get this call, just random call. And this guy goes, hi, I was referred by so-and-so. I'm going to come into the office right now and drop off my paperwork and I want you to manage my money. We put the Chinese food away. We go out to the front area and it's a big account. And we're like, do you want to have a meeting? Do you want to? Yeah. And he said, here's the thing. He goes, I'm really good at what I do. The friend who referred me is really good at what he does. And he goes, when it comes to experts, I know how to hire, I know how to monitor, and I know how to replace when needed. And he was like, so here you go. He's still a client to this day. It's been 7 years. He's like, so here you go. Do your best. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, I'll find somebody else. And I thought, he goes, but I got to get back to focusing on what I do. And I trust my friend who referred you guys, and they've been working with you for a long time, and just treat me the way you treat my friend. Have a good day. And I was like, and it changed my life.
Yeah.
Because I was like, wow. I was like, that's somebody who specializes in what they what they've already invested their time, their money, their energy into. And he said, I know how to hire, I know how to monitor, and I know how to replace if needed. And I was like, Okay.
You're like, sir, I don't know if you realize you just taught me a way of life
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
That is such a good mindset.
Because I thought I was going to have to be a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer,
Sure.
all of it,
Uh-huh.
Everything all at once. And it turns out I don't need to. It turns out I can just
What?
focus on my stuff.
Yeah.
And all I have to do is be really good at building out the rest of my team.
Right.
You know? And that's the other thing I would say too, when you're kind of looking at like strategic partners to help you get to where you want to go. And you're so good at this. And again, there's so many overlaps with what we do. It's really wild.
It's really weird. Yeah.
But the other thing is be mindful of quick fixes.
Mm-hmm.
If you start, like you were saying, where we've got everybody's an expert and it's all so easy and like there's this treasure map that we all know, there's a holy grail somewhere and all you have to do is like, you know, chew on this one thing and this one hard candy and you'll just be skinny forever and it's all good. And
that is my whole job. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, Ozempic. Like, that's a whole other thing. But like, you know, all the quick fix kind of stuff. It's the same with finance. I'm like, I tell clients, I'm like, you're never going to see a statement where you made 300%.
Yeah.
It's not going to exist.
Yeah.
You're also not going to see a statement where I go, sorry, everything went to zero.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, because there's a method. And I tell people, I don't run a day trading shop. I run an investment business. I run a wealth management business.
Yes.
I can give you things over decades of time where I can explain to you the process of what I'm doing.
Right.
So if you meet with somebody, and it always does kind of sound a little like degrading, right? They're like, it's so simple. I can't believe you came here today. Like today's the day when your whole life is instantly overnight changes, right? And there's just as much of that in your field as there is in mine.
Sure.
Our clients, they go to like library, like free seminars. They come back, they're like, what do you think of this? I'm like, I think we went over this. I think we did this. I'm like, I don't think that's I don't think that's the move. You know what I mean? So, but I mean, actually, probably in your field way more, just because people are so desperate.
Sure.
To be skinny, and I think that's something you were always really good at. Is you're like in your example, the pants will follow. Like you will fit in the pants. You're like, but you're not going to fit in the pants because we're going to calorie restrict you to death. Where you fit in those pants for 2 weeks, and by the way, you screwed up your metabolism so bad, you're never going to fit in them again. You're like, you were with me. You're like, that's not how I roll. Like if that's what you want to go do, that's not how we do it. And I was like, okay. And because that's the other thing, especially with your body, is what I'm seeing a lot with a lot of people I know is like as you age, the tricks that you had when you're 25, they don't work so good when you're 30 or you're 35 or you're 50 or all these different ages, right?
Right. And then I think you have to sit there and go, okay, so what is the driving motivator? I think a lot of people think, okay, you know, I want to lose weight. I want to be slimmer. And they forget that yes, you can lose weight and get in better shape, but if you do it in a way that's unhealthy, what are we doing here? Like then at a certain point you have to kind of level with yourself and be like, okay, I simply just, I guess, looks based, you know? Whereas if I am approaching it from a mindset of health, it's like, okay, how can I establish these different habits where I feel good? Like I'm not starving all the time. I'm not spending an insane amount of time in the gym, because people will do that in order to fit those pant size, you know, that they want to be in.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking of the cost, you're like, well, it's at the expense of your health. Because I think people immediately associate, okay, thinness equals health. No matter how you get there. Doesn't matter if it's diet pills, doesn't matter what, as long as you get there. And it really looks into that whole quick fix mindset where it's like, yeah, maybe you can quickly fix the problem, but did you really fix the problem? You didn't. You maybe got to that goal, but at the expense of your health, your time. And I would imagine too, the same thing happens with finance. And the crazy thing is, people are doing all these quick fixes because they want something to happen quickly, but then it ends up taking so much more time because they're all not working. So all of a sudden you're like, I've tried 12 different quick fixes. None of them worked. Now all of a sudden I just lost another 5 months.
And by the way, probably a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yes. So you're just like, man, I didn't get the result I wanted. Now I'm down money. What was quick about it, you know? And I think if people are looking both, whether it's finance or health, as just a long-term lifestyle, like, hey, this is just who I am now. This is just how I live now. that is so much more freeing, because then you're like, I'm in it for the long haul. And it doesn't have to be as extreme when you're in it for the long haul, because you just keep chipping away and keep working at it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, a year went by and I'm in a totally different place than I was at the beginning of the year.
I always think about that since we started working together, where I was like your 5-month example. If in 5 months, let's say there's 20 weeks, and you would have just lost a half a pound a week, you'd be down 10 pounds. I had a client that came in the other day. Isn't it wild to you how much more money people are willing to spend on the quick fixes too?
Yeah, it is interesting.
I had a client that came in, she did cool sculpting. She spent like north of 10 grand. She lost 2 pounds. I'm like, so we paid $5,000 per pound that you lost? Like,
Ooh.
you know what I mean? And I'm like, it's crazy to me.
It's wild.
It's same with some of the investments people will come in where I'm like, you paid how much money to the person for them to sell you this? Like, what is this? Like, because the other thing is, like, if it feels like sales, it probably is sales. And if it's something that's core to investing in yourself, it shouldn't feel salesy.
Right.
It shouldn't look salesy. It shouldn't feel salesy. And it's probably going to look a lot more like work.
Yeah.
It's probably going to look a lot more like, because the salesy stuff always, you don't have to do anything.
No.
Right?
Just give me your money.
Just take this Ozempic shot, you're good. Just go do this cool sculpting thing, you're good. Just give me your money, you're fine. Sign this contract, you're good to go.
Sure.
If all of a sudden you are part of it and it's a partnership with the expert that you're working with, it's a lot more time, it's a lot more effort.
Right.
And just, again, kind of committing to like, I'm not offloading this onto somebody else. I'm having somebody partner with me on this.
Right.
Because you can give everybody, same as me, like you can have a great meeting with the client, and if they go after the meeting and go buy a bunch of Dunkin' Munchkins, you can't control that.
No.
Same with me. Like we can have a great meeting, and if they decide to go, on Prime Day spend $5 grand on their credit card, there's nothing I can do about that, right? So it's something where you've got to make sure, and I'm sure you're this way too, of just like when I interview clients, and I do interview them initially, and I always say, I want to make sure that we're the right fit for you, but also that you're the right fit for us. Because I'm not going to sit there with somebody that's not willing to work with me.
Sure.
And I need them to buy into the ideas that we're talking about. And you're the same way, like, because we care about our clients.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're not going to drag someone through a process that they don't want to be going through. And that's the thing too, is it's not like either one of us, our approach is like, here's what you have to do. I don't care what you have to say. This is the process,
Right.
It's not like that's the approach.
It's not a product. Yeah.
No, exactly. Like, we are dealing with living human beings. Like, they, like you said before, have agency over themselves. So we can kind of lay out those different options for them as far as like, hey, here are different avenues you could take that are going to get you to a decent result. The thing that I always think about is a lot of people who I've worked with have a very much like perfectionist type mindset where, it's like, okay, if I can't do this perfectly, I would rather not do it at all. And it's really just hitting home the idea that there's no such thing as the perfect plan. And even if there was, if you're not doing it, then it's still not the perfect plan. So it's really more so being like, okay, realistically, what can I do? And if you're not working out at all, to tell someone all of a sudden, hey, you got to be in the gym 5 days a week, it's not going to happen. Like, sure, you would see.
Maybe for 1 week.
Of course, yeah.
Then they'll get hurt, probably, is what will happen. That's what happens to me. I get like a shin splint or something, and I'm out anyway.
Right,
yeah.
Of course. Yeah, either it's injury, a vacation pops up. Well, I don't have the tools of what I should do with that. How do I pivot? Like, I don't have access to a gym. What do I do? And then it just all goes out the window.
Yeah.
So